Welcome and thank you for joining today. We are excited to have you here today for our Pathlock Innovation Series. The session right now is how are you protected from the biggest threats and risks to your SAP systems and your business? Our presenter today is Anand Koti, Director of Solutions and Engineering with Pathlock, and he will introduce himself a little bit more in just a minute. My name is Stephanie Anderson. I'm the Global Webinar Manager here at Pathlock. I am going to put a link in the chat shortly with our schedule of events for the day. We have many events coming up today and for the next few days. And if you would like to join any of those sessions, I encourage you to look at the link that I just put into the chat, and you can register for any of those sessions we have today, tomorrow, or Thursday. And with that, I just have a few housekeeping items to go over. If you have any audio issues during this webinar, click on Preferences and then Audio. From there, you can check to see if you're using the appropriate audio device. You can also click on the play sound to check if you can hear the sound coming through your speakers. There will be a Q&A session following this presentation, so please type any questions into the questions box that you will find on your control panel for our speakers to answer at the end of the event. To prevent background noise, everyone is on mute. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Anand to do his presentation.
All right, thanks, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending the webinar. I'm Anand Koti. I'm the Director of Solutions Engineering at Pathlock. I've been with the company for 2 years and in security industry, specialized in SAP for the last 15 years. Today's topic is all about securing SAP applications. So what I'm going to walk you guys through is that why is it important to secure SAP applications, threats around SAP applications, and how you should be securing your SAP applications. That would be a sequence of events that I'm going to talk about, right? But let's start with why is SAP applications a target for threat actors, right? So I took some facts from SAP website itself. SAP publishes a fact sheet every year, and you can Google it and you'll get the content as well. I'll provide you the link. But look at the content, look at the data here, right? SAP customers represent 80%, 87% of Forbes global 2000 companies. SAP customers represent 98% of the top 100 most valued brands in the world. So as you could see, the percentages here are significantly higher, right? And that means SAP's reach in the market is in ERP market is long and wide, right? And the other interesting fact on the right hand side, as you could see, is that 76% of world's transactions run on SAP. Now, this is touching close to $22 trillion. Now, if you are a threat actor, for a second, think about you are a person who wants to hack a system. Penetrating through the firewalls is one thing. Once you penetrate, where do you want to go? Where is your crown jewels? This is where SAP comes into life, right? People know that SAP is the most critical business application that any organization would have, because it's not an application that's as cheap, and it's like easy to install and all that. People spend a lot of money, millions of dollars, to buy the licenses, make sure it's up and running. Now, when you're looking at it as a threat actor, you would know that if someone is spending millions of dollars, they're trying to get 10x of that money from that particular application. Obviously, that is the reason why the threat actors have figured it out that SAP applications are the target. And these numbers also indicate why they should be targeting, right? Now, SAP is also helping with the whole equation. Now that you establish that SAP is the business critical application, and SAP runs the most a lot of Fortune to the 200 companies out there, What is the pushback that I heard in my career when I'm talking to prospects? First thing I heard is that, oh, SAP cannot be hacked, right? Oh, no, no, I never heard about SAP being hacked. Now, that is always a myth that SAP cannot be hacked. It's not the matter of if, it's a matter of when SAP will be hacked, right? SAP applications will be hacked. Now, to point you in the right direction, one of the things I want to show you guys is that there are about 8 or 9 cert alerts issued by different government agencies. The reason these agencies are giving you this cert alerts is because you know they are being informed about attacks that are happening against SAP applications, right? And it's not just we saying it that, oh, SAP will be is a vulnerable system, but the idea is that considering how much volume of data that is stored within SAP applications, the volume of transactions that are running on SAP application, it's important to make sure you're securing these applications. And 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 the US government, the government agencies across the globe are already indicating that the threat actors are attacking the systems. It not it, your system might not be attacked yet, but this is an indicator. This is an alert that you should take care of them. Now, if you go into Google and just search any search engine for that reason, you go into a search engine and start searching, saying, "Oh, um, SAP exploit," and you will find a bunch of exploits that are just sitting right in the plain sight. And guess what? If there are so many things on the plain side, think about going into the dark web and trying to figure it out. There are ways you can get into SAP applications and get the system down within a minute. We are talking about the mission critical application that is very close and dear to your organization, can be down within a minute if that vulnerability exists in your the vulnerability exists in your organization, within your SAP application. The exploit is definitely available. The other thing I also want to point out is that our researchers recently pointed out that after every patch Tuesday, there's something called exploit Wednesday coming out. Now, the reason it is because if you are a threat actor, again, going back to my theory about being a threat actor, right? If you are someone who is trying to exploit a system, trying to build an exploit from scratch would take time. Finding out at 0 days is not that easy, right? Unless you're using the system day in, day out and trying to figure it out, that's a whole different story. But finding a 0 day is not that easy. It doesn't matter what application it's, and SAP is definitely not. Now, if you're a threat actor, what would you spend time on? So what we found out is that as a threat actor, what these people are trying to do is that they are waiting for the patch Tuesday. And I'm sure everyone in this room aware of what a patch Tuesday is. This is the day when SAP releases patches for some of the critical vulnerabilities that its team of researchers have identified. Now, during the patch Tuesday release, SAP explains to their customers exactly what the issue with the patches, like what the issue with that particular vulnerability is. They'll explain you what system it is, what version of the system is impacted, how deep and wide this vulnerability is. Like if you don't take care of it, what is the CVSS score around it, and whatnot. So if you're a threat actor, you already know a lot of information just by the information that was published by SAP. Now, what they're trying to do is that take that information and build upon it. So that they don't need to reinvent the wheel, rather they take the wheel that has already been built, right? Just add upon it. So it's important to make sure you patch your system regularly, and also make sure um, you understand the risks associated with your SAP applications. Now, a lot of times people come back and say, what, we do have good governance, you know, uh, management. Okay, so that is great. having a good access governance. We at Pathlock, we also do, educate people about how it's important to have good access governance policies, right? Now, having a good access governance is great, but it's not sufficient. Now, the reason it is that because if you know the application well enough, these applications don't work in silos. They are connected to multiple different applications, multiple different third-party applications. Now, it's important to make sure you're watching out how the nuts and bolts of these systems are configured. Now, if you have a SAP router and you put an asterisk or a 0 or 1, these make a huge difference in SAP. It's all about how you configure the system, is how people are allowed to connect to your SAP applications. Now, it's so having good access governance is great. That's the really first step. But from then on, you have to build on top of it, and making sure you also have a visibility into who's connecting to the system, what data is getting exported or imported for that reason. The third part is that a lot of times I hear this from my prospects is that everyone understands SAP lingo. This understanding SAP lingo is true to some extent. Having spent 15 years in SAP world, I can tell you for the fact SAP is a big beast by itself. Now, understanding SAP lingo is not easy for any third-party person coming in. You know, if you are talking to an infosec person and start talking to them about all the configurations that we have in RZ10, and the parameters that you have, there are about 3,000 parameters to start with. Now, if you start talking about the lingo of SAP, it's not common understanding that they talk the same language. So it's also equally, so that means they're losing the visibility into it. You talk a different language and they talk a different language. Your risk is different and their risk is completely different. So once you go beyond the folks from SAP, it's very hard for them to understand um, SAP language. So that's something that I hear a lot, saying that, oh, we know what we're talking about, but guess what? You probably know it, but once you go one step to the side, the people who don't understand SAP in depth as you do, and just that is just the reality. Uh, I also hear that we do have security budget and all, but once you start digging into it, right? What you realize is that yeah, they do have security budget, which is very as you know, the security budgets are always lean and thin. But the idea here is that the security budget is not always geared towards cybersecurity, especially cybersecurity with ERP in focus, right? Because end of the day, people are ready to spend millions of dollars trying to build firewalls and DMZs and all that. But what they don't realize is that once you start getting through those firewalls, someone gets through those firewalls, where are they heading towards? They're heading towards your crown jewels. And what kind of protection do you really have for your ERP applications, right? And the next question I also keep asking them is that, okay, great, you do have some budget, but guess what? There is cybersecurity talent shortage, and you can look it up in any search engine, and you will know there's a cybersecurity shortage of talent for especially for securing ERP applications. Now, there are people who come back and say, oh, you know what, you're right about it, but we're spending enough money on this, the firewalls and DMZs. Do you really think we need it, right? Now, the point I usually guide them to is saying that, you know what, I go to RSA every year, and every year there is more and more vendors popping out, and each vendor is telling me that they're going to secure my DMZ or firewalls. Now, the point I'm trying to understand is each one is different in their methodologies, how they're approaching these threats around the firewalls. Now, if you as a CISO, you probably have, a couple of dollars in your pocket, and you can spend on one or two tools, not necessarily all the 3,000 vendors out there. You can't foolproof it. So it's always important to make sure you have the second layer of defense. Your first layer of defense is great, that's a must, but you need to have second layer of defense as well. So this is where I keep guiding them and telling them that what is the right thing to do. So to summarize, there is always a myth, there's always a pushback about what is, and some people are away from reality. So I want to make sure you understand attacks against SAP applications is real. Access governance is not sufficient. SAP lingo, not everyone understands it. And the budgeting that you have is not, even if you have budgeting, you would not find cybersecurity talent. So that's a shortage. So it's very important for you to um, you know, make sure you have the right tools to fill the gap. Now, I'm going to get to that as well. But so far, what we talked about, we established the fact that SAP is a critical application and the myths that you guys are thinking about and versus the reality, right? Now, this is a small a bunch of pictures around the different cert alerts that were issued. And if you want to look it up, all you need to do is go search for SAP cert alerts, and you will get a bunch of them, um, in a bunch of from different government agencies. Now, as you could look at that, since 2012, once people started realizing that SAP is a critical application, and that the target has been SAP applications for a while. Since 2012 to 2021, there's an increase in number of cert alerts issued by the US government. There's increase in number of attacks against SAP applications. We under an NDA also been reached out about uh, trying to analyze the attacks that have been happening in some of the organizations. Now, the reason I'm highlighting this fact is that not everything is out in the news. It's not necessary. By law, it's not everything is necessary that you need to report what is going on. Depending on the impact, depending on the severity, in some cases it comes out. In most cases, this news it never surfaces out, right? And one thing I can tell you is that after the fact, when an attack has already happened, right? After the fact, if you start analyzing where the attack has been initiated, what routes the person has taken to get to your system, and how long he's been in the in your ERP application before he started doing his act, right? It is an interesting journey that we noticed a lot of different patterns there. One thing I can tell you is that before any attacker attacks your system, he is in your system for more than a couple of months, and he's just studying the pattern in which you are doing what you're doing, right? So that he was not no one was noticing him. There were cases where we saw someone rolling back some of the patches and then pushing back the patch again in the system. People taking privileged user permissions, whatnot, right? So that we have seen it all. But the cost of us coming after the fact and trying to investigate, or anyone for that reason, anyone you are engaging after the fact and engaging is 10x more than taking care of it upfront. Right? The proactive approach is much cheaper than reactive approach to start with. Yes, proactive will take some money. Like if you buy an insurance, yeah, it takes you some money upfront. But guess what? In the long term, it's definitely something you are at peace, right? That's how making sure having a proactive approach is always helpful as compared to a reactive approach. Now, what should you do to protect your ERP applications? Now, so far we talked about a bunch of things around, being SAP being critical, and then the myth versus reality, and also showed you some of the cert alerts issued by the government, and also the how the graph is going up. year by year, and the number of attacks against SAP application are also increasing. Now, how do you secure your ERP applications? The first thing we talked about during our conversation is making sure the nuts and bolts of the system. SAP gives you a baseline. There's something called vulnerability management. Vulnerability management, again, we offer a product around it, but again, the idea is not to uh, push you on what Pathlock sells, but the idea is to give you an idea, give you an insight into the methodologies, right? Vulnerability management is an important module that you need to deploy in your landscape. What this vulnerability management gives you is that it gives you an insight into the risks that you have in your, like, or give you a security posture of your ERP system. Now, I can tell you for the fact, 9 out of the 10 customers I spoke to, even the people who are in the basis administration and all, when I start asking them how many ERP systems they have, they start taking a while to figure it out. Now, once I start digging deep and saying, you know what, fine, if you don't know how many ERP systems, can you tell me how these ERP systems, some of these ERP systems are connected? Then that is also a puzzle for them. Like, give me some time, I'm going to figure it out. If you are an SAP expert and you don't have a clear grasp of how your ERP systems are configured, what systems you are connected to, right? Assume the situation that InfoSec people or your executives are running it. So it's all about trust but verify. So what we suggest is that you run a periodic assessment on your ERP systems, all your ERP systems, not just production and not just production system, but also non-production system, because they're equally important. Unless you're working your non-production on a silo, which is not the case. If someone compromises your non-production system, I bet that they will get to your production system as well. Now, running these assessment scans will give you a visibility into your security posture of your ERP systems and get you how vulnerable some of your ERP systems are. So that based on the criticality that has been indicated in those reports, you can go back and talk to your business administrators or security administrators or basis administrator for that reasons to make sure they get fixed ASAP. The second thing I would want to point out is that not only it's important for you to make sure you're, you have a visibility and your team is working on patching the system and all, but sometimes you also need to understand the business impact, what this means. Because a lot of times what I hear is that, oh, we are different. We work differently. Like every business is different for that reason, But the point is, yes, your business is different. What does that mean? What that means is that they're telling us that, patching the system, the business audience might not like it because there might be a downtime. So it's always important to not just show them why it is important to fix that particular vulnerability, but also give them some kind of business uh, sense to it, like business impact to it, right? Right. Oh, if you don't patch the system, this is the business impact. Do you want to put your name on it? If yes, let's take it that way. If you know, then you can move on, right? Like you can go on to fix the issue. So getting to run the vulnerability assessment is the most important thing that you should be doing as an organization. Now, these scans that we're talking about, at least in Pathlock, we provide 4,000 assessment scans. And these scans can be run against all your SAP applications. And you don't need to be a cybersecurity expert. I talked about cybersecurity talent. You don't need to have a cybersecurity talent to run these scans because the scans are already developed by a cybersecurity person. Now, from then on, it's always easy for you to grasp and understand how things are growing, and also we'll provide you what you call as a maturity curve, and showing you visibility into, okay, today when I ran it, we have about 100 different vulnerabilities, but next time you run, It should not be 200. That means you're not doing anything about the vulnerabilities that you found. Rather, it should be 80, 90, or something on those lines that shows that, oh, your team is doing the job and your system is a little more secure than what it was before. We do provide custom code scanning as well. Now, custom code scanning is important. Um, think about all the access governance and cybersecurity policies, assessments that you have put in. But you might have a developer who are coming in as contractors. And when these contractors or a full-time employees, what they do is when they develop the code, as you know, if you worked in SAP, each one have their own set of expertise. If I was a functional consultant, FICO consultant, all my world just runs around that. I never understood anything about basis, security, ABAP, nothing around it, right? But guess what? If you are someone who's pushing the code from your dev system to production system, who's really getting into that code and trying to unwrap the code and look into the code to make sure there's nothing in that code that will jeopardize your system or putting some kind of risk into your production system, right? This is where it's important to make sure you have tools in place to assess the code, not just for one developer that you have, but most likely you have at least 5 to 6 developers to start with. And we have run into an organization, we have 24 different developers in different countries just so that they can, because they have a transformation project going on and they're pushing things into production left and right. So it's important to make sure you have the visibility and what these developers are really developing. What does that code really mean? You know, in a sense of compliance, in a sense of security, in the sense of performance for that reason, right? You know, bad code can slow down your system irrespective of you're using it for HANA or anything for that reason, right? The system is as good as the code that has been pushed into that production environment. So that is where it is important for you to analyze the code. At Pathlock, we do provide 130 different patterns that we can analyze. We can also customize those patterns. We can build on top of it and whatnot. Now, these patterns can also be complement your CVA, code inspector, and any standard SAP tools that you have using. You can also complement them. In addition to that scans that they provide, we provide a bunch of scans as well. Transports, and I'm sure everyone in this room is very familiar with transports. 10 out of 10 basis administrators who spend 25 years in this industry, and that's their lifetime in the industry, uh, they confirm the fact that they do not look at inside the transport to see what's inside the transport before they move into the production system. What they do though is they do transport management. People get confused about it. I should have put this in the myth and versus reality. But the point is that the myth is that transport management can take care of what's vulnerabilities inside it, but that's just not true, as you all know, right? Because transport management is just purely pushing transports from your dev system to a production system, and all the basis administrators are trying to make sure is that the the pattern in which these transports are moving in are there in the right order, because there are dependencies and whatnot. But what we are trying to tell you is that this transport is literally a truck carrying a bulk load of things. You have to stop the truck, make sure analyze what's inside that truck before you move it to production system. You cannot move things into production system without analyzing them, right? It's very, very important to analyze that truck with what is inside it before. It could be a Trojan horse, like programs like XPRA that can go into production, unwrap itself, and then run it from there. We don't know what's inside it. So what we suggest is that we do provide automatic scans on transports where we can stop the transport automatically before it moves to production. And even if the basis administrator releases it, then there is workflows that will make sure the basis administrator uh, gets approval before things get moved to production system. It's not about rushing through to get into production system, but making sure you're following the right processes and procedures before you move things into production system. Now, that brings us to the last topic, which is around threat detection and response. Now, so far we talked about vulnerability assessment, we talked about custom code assessment, we talked about transport assessment. Now, threat detection and response is like a compensating control. What this does is that it will allow you to monitor any threats that potentially can exploit your system. Now, the threats, we have built about 1,500 signatures around it. And you know, if you're using any tools, it's important to understand how many signatures are out there that will monitor for these threats. Now, there are cases when you, as an organization, accept the risk, saying that, oh, this particular vulnerability that you, as Pathlock, has pointed out to me, I don't need to fix it because I don't have time for it, I don't have resources for it, whatnot. Your reasons, your excuses could be many, but your excuses are not are the are the pathway for a threat actor. Like now they know that you could be a low-hanging fruit out there. So what they are trying to do is they're trying to attack a system like yours. Now, when they're trying to attack a system like yours, if you don't have a compensating controls in place for that particular set of vulnerabilities that you have, it's important to make sure you have some level of compensating controls. If not, your system can be exposed, your system can be uh, exploited. Now, the topic I didn't go deep into is that these threat actors can be of different categories. Depending on their intent, they could just go in and try to do a fraud. you know there could be someone who want to sabotage the system, espionage the system, and there are different types of threat actors as well. It's a huge topic to discuss for the next webinar, I guess. But the idea here is that there are different types of threat actors depending on their intent. If they are attacking a system, it's hard to guess what their intent is until they start doing some actions in the system. Now, it's important before they do all that, I would highly suggest you make sure you have some kind of compensating controls in place that will monitor your system, not just your production system, but your entire set of entire landscape. That's production, staging, and non-production systems supporting that production environment. So, and if you have a SOC team that is sitting out there and saying, "Oh, I'm monitoring my firewalls through," but it's important for us to send any vectors that we have come across to them so that they can make meaningful sense of it, because they are constantly doing this day in day out. So it's important to send the data to any of the SIM or tools like Logarithm, Oxide, IBM, QRadar, and whatnot. So there are a lot of different tools out there. So it's important to send the data out there. If they are willing to take it and they're interested to look into it, absolutely. But we as Pathlock will highly recommend that you send the data there. And the product obviously supports that as well. So, um, so this, I just want to wrap it up to say that, want to reiterate the fact that SAP is a mission critical applications, and securing it should be your highest priority, irrespective of how secure your DMZ is, how many VPNs you're using. Attackers will get to your SAP system, and it's important to make sure you have tools to make sure you get the visibility into the risk posture of your system, and also we have compensating controls to monitor your system's applications as well. With that, I would hand it over to Stephanie.
Thank you, Anand, for your presentation. We just have a few announcements, and also if you have any questions, I encourage you now to add them to the question box and we can answer those at this time. But while we're waiting for those to come in, just a few announcements. We encourage you to book a meeting with us here at Pathlock, and if you email events@pathlock.com before the January 31st and mention you attended a session at the innovation series today, you will win a $25 Starbucks virtual card. So just make sure to email events@pathlock.com before January 31st and tell us what the title of your session was that you attended today, and we would be happy to send you over that Starbucks gift card. Okay, so will you go to the next slide, Anand? Yeah, so we just wanted to encourage you also in the chat, you're gonna see a link to pathlock.com/innovation-series that has the schedule of events. We have many exciting sessions coming up today, and you can see the schedule there, and you can register if you haven't already. So go ahead and click on that if you would like to. And I'm not seeing any questions. So with that, we just wanted to say thank you so much, and we hope to see you at future sessions.